Okay, so we are recording and we're going to get going. So we have up to 45 minutes for this session today, which is the first in a series of show and shares that we're doing as part of Barnet Citizens Assembly. Each of the show and share sessions is going to be related to one of the different assembly, either evenings or weekends that have happened most recently. So what we're focusing on today is session number 1, which we kicked off this week. So really exciting, the first time that everyone has come together. And that was on Tuesday, the 21st of February, between 6:30 and 9 p.m. at Middlesex University's Hendon campus. So big welcome to everyone on the call. I know that we probably have a mix of people from across the community in Barnet. We have some residents, we have some councillors, we have some council staff and others who are just interested in how the Climate Assembly and the Citizens Assembly is working in Barnet. So no matter who you are or where you've come from and the reason you've come today, you're all very welcome to be here. This is really part of us trying to be open about the process that we're running and a really big opportunity for you to learn and follow as we're going along. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Kelly McBride. I am the lead facilitator along with my colleague Hannah for the Barnet Citizens Assembly, and we're from an organisation called TPX Impact, and Citizens Assemblies are something that I have been facilitating for a few years now, including ones on thematic issues like climate change and sustainability. So what this show and share is really about is an opportunity for all of you to find out more about Barnet Citizens Assembly. So what is it all about? What is it that we're focusing on? It's also an opportunity for you to hear about what we did in particular sessions. So as I said, this is all about the first session that we held earlier this week. And it's also an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have about the process. And I'm sure as we're delivering more of these show and share sessions, we'll learn a lot along the way about what people are interested in, and we might be able to adapt our plans as we're delivering future sessions. But please do, just because we have so many people on the call, keep yourself on mute as we're going through, but I do really encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat, just who you are, where you might be joining from today, and any interest you have in Barnet Citizens Assembly. So please do introduce yourself in the chat. It's really good to know who's in the room. And please do, as we're going through, post questions at any time. And if we have enough time, we will respond to questions in the session, open up for discussion if that would be useful. But if there's anything we can't manage to get through in the time, we're happy to take things away and find a way to get responses to you. So yeah, just another flag to please do introduce yourself in the chat, say hello, and feel free to ask questions. If you're not too familiar with Zoom, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little speech bubble, and that's what you need to click just to open up the chat. And next to that, there is something called a Q&A, which has 2 speech bubbles, and that's a place where you can post questions. But I don't really mind if you post it there or in the chat, do whatever works for you. Okay, so Barnet Citizens Assembly, just to give a bit of an introduction to what it is and some of the context around it. The Citizens Assembly is a particular approach to bringing people together to discuss climate issues. And you might not be familiar with what they are, but at the height, a Citizens Assembly is basically a way to bring together a group of randomly selected everyday people to learn about an issue, to deliberate, and to make recommendations together. So what that practically means for what we're doing in Barnet is that back just before Christmas and into the new year, we sent out 8,000 invitations to randomly selected households across the borough, working with a recruitment partner, which was an organisation called Sortition Foundation. From that, we received well over 350 expressions of interest from across the community, and then selected 40 people that were broadly representative of a bunch of different demographics, and also an attitudinal question around awareness of climate change as well. So the people that were brought together really are from all different parts of the community. They're all starting from different places. Some of them are really new to issues around climate change and sustainability. Others may have had a bit of an interest before. But the point is that we're facilitating a great space for them to learn more about the issues, to work together, to share their experiences, to deliberate, and then ultimately to come up with a set of recommendations at the end of this process. And we set a question that's there to guide this process, which is as follows on the screen. Barnet has declared a climate emergency. What more can we do together to make Barnet more sustainable now and in the future? And that question is going to be at the forefront, really, of all of our sessions and our considerations as we're going through. And there was a bit of a workshop process to develop this question. It was tested with some people across the community. We looked at different words, and this is what we settled on. It's good to know that this isn't the only assembly that's happening. We are also facilitating a young people's assembly, and they're actually going to meet for the first time next weekend. And in that process, we're bringing together 20 young people to discuss the same question and themes in some interactive sessions. And they are also going to be invited to share their vision and ideas with the Citizens Assembly, so connecting with the 40 members that we have in the Citizens Assembly at different points. And we'll be working towards publishing jointly their recommendations at the end. We're also going to be working with Middlesex University to evaluate the process. Evaluations of things like citizens' assemblies are a really great way to see how they work in practice, the impact that they might have, and to provide some useful learning and feedback, not just to the council, but also, I guess, to the wider community and to assembly members themselves. So watch out for more information about that. And something to say at this point is that we've been thinking quite hard about what happens after the assembly session. So there are going to be a few things that we're already planning that are going to take place. I think it's always good to know about from the start. So first of all, this is pretty standard in an assembly process. The members will be invited to present their recommendations to elected representatives, and that will be through the Barnet Council cabinet system in late June 2023. We're also planning what we're calling a community action planning day, and this might be something some people on the call are interested in too. And that will be taking place in mid-July. But the idea is that we're going to bring together different people from across Barnet, including businesses and community groups, to plan how to deliver on the assembly recommendations. This is a really intentional next step because, as we heard in our presentations this week, a small number, 4% of emissions across the borough are in the direct control of the council, which means that partnership working together is required across the community around the other 96% of emissions. So we want to involve the community in some action planning based on those recommendations that the members come up with. And of course, we'll be having a celebration event as well. And that'll be a great opportunity for the members in both the Young People's Assembly and this assembly to hear what progress has been made and what plans are happening next. There's also some conversations about how we develop opportunities for members to be involved in monitoring what happens next, how we involve the wider community in learning about some of the issues that we discussed through the assembly process through some engaging community days. And we are very much trying to capture the story, both individual and collectively, of the assembly as we're going through as well. So that can be a reflection long into the future, we hope, of how this process has gone in Barnet, and a good record. I just wanted to touch on who is in the room for the assembly sessions, because there's also an opportunity in here for some of you as well. So we have the 40 members. This whole process is really about their learning, their deliberations, and the recommendations they make together. And everything else is either supporting and enabling them or there for reasons of openness and transparency. Those 40 members are supported by 2 lead facilitators, of which I am one, along with my colleague from TPX Impact, and 6 group facilitators. So they are people that work directly, maybe around small group tables or facilitating some of the interactive activities to ensure that people are able to make contributions, able to have space to share what they want to share, and a kind of understanding what's going on at any given time. So they have a really, really important role. We also have a series of invited contributors, and we'll be posting who they are all along the way up on the process website, so people can see who they are and the information that people are hearing, along with things like the slides from their presentations. And the purpose of the invited contributors is to support the learning journey of the people that are taking part. And then we have some other people in the room who are not there to make an active contribution. They are simply there to listen and to observe. So we have observers, of which anyone really across the community can apply. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. But the idea is that you just have the opportunity to be there in the physical space to see how things are playing out. But very importantly, we don't let observers do things like join in the discussions or join the small group discussions, as we want members to really own that. And we also have some people from Barnet Council, primarily the council sustainability team, who have commissioned this process. But again, they are there really in an observer capacity, unless they are giving presentations on things related to the Sustainability Action Plan. Okay, so that's a little bit about the Assembly, a little bit about what it is. I want to go now into session 1 and what we did. And I can see that lots of you are posting in the chat, so that's brilliant. Thank you so much for saying hello. I'll come to any questions that have come up at the end. So session one, as I mentioned, was the first session of this entire assembly process, and that happened on Tuesday evening this week. So I'm going to tell you what we did in that session, just to set some expectations for this and future show and shares. What we don't tend to do is share what we call like draft outputs from each of the sessions, or kind of real detail about what the members have been coming up with and discussing. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, not least because they're a work in progress. We don't know what might change, what the members might decide to do in the next session that might be a bit different. So we don't want to kind of mislead or tell the wrong story when they're working through a process. And secondly, we of course want the members to really work on this together. So we don't want to kind of unduly influence them in any way. So the level of detail about what comes out of sessions and things like that will not be very much. This is more about process and how we do what it is that we're doing, and the kind of information and things that people might be hearing about. So in that first session, it was 2.5 hours. What we did was we welcomed and introduced the participants to us and to each other. We explained more about the Citizens' Assembly and why it's happening. We introduced the process and the journey that they're about to go on together. We introduced quite a high-level global, national and local context for the process, which had a bit of information about, what is climate change, what is sustainability, what are we talking about here. We did a bit of work to start to get knowing each other and how we work together. And as you can imagine, people have lots of questions. So we were trying to capture some along the way, and we're planning to respond to them next week. We're currently just working through the things that have come up. The first set of contributors, and a contributor, just to remind you, is someone that we invite along to talk to the Assembly, share something with the Assembly, maybe present something to the Assembly. And we had a few in this session. And the first two were Councillor Barry Rawlings and Councillor Alan Schneiderman, who were there to do the official opening. So in doing that, they welcomed the participants. They talked a bit about why this assembly is happening, the context, and their vision for Barnet, and why the resident voice is so important in this discussion. They also talked a little bit about what they thought the influence of the Assembly would be, the dedication they had to the process, and their understanding of the next steps. And we felt it was quite important to hear that coming from some elected members at the beginning. We then did a presentation about the process, a little bit similar to some of the stuff you heard there, but a bit more detail that's useful for them, and introduced the concept of what we call conversation guidelines. So these are things that we like to develop alongside the participants, just as a kind of reminder of the way that they want to work together in the space, and they'll sit with us alongside us for the rest of the process, and we'll keep reminding people. But conversation guidelines are things like, we want to in this space make sure that we're listening to each other, that we're letting others be heard, that we're being respectful in our discussions, and that actually it's fine to agree to disagree. We don't expect everyone in this process to have the same starting point, position, opinions, or things like that. We can disagree with each other, but in doing so, just be respectful. And that then set them up for the first conversation they had, which was just introductory. So we started by doing introductions in pairs and then built up in their small groups. And they basically just shared with each other some simple stuff, their names, their connections to Barnet, and something they would like to consider as we work together in this space. And then we tried to get them to find one thing in common. And then we shared that with a wider group. So the members had a chance just to talk one-on-one, particularly for those that maybe were less familiar with this kind of setting, a little bit nervous, and then built up to introduce themselves to the group. And I have to say that the buzz in the room at this point was pretty good. People were getting stuck in and getting engaged. So yeah, we certainly have a good bunch to be working with. We then moved on to an activity that we call Think, Build, Draw, or Talk, Build, Draw. And this basically was an opportunity for the participants to start from wherever they are, and wherever they are is absolutely fine, to convey what does climate change and sustainability mean to you. So basically, they could either sit there, think about it for a little bit, and then explain it in their own words. They could grab some of the drawing materials on the table and draw a picture, or they could grab some of the other materials we had to build something that represented what climate change and sustainability meant to them. And again, yeah, people got stuck in. They used all of the different things that we had on the table. There's just one picture there of some examples from one wee group. But that was basically just used as a device for them to then have discussions around where they saw any similarities in their understanding of climate change and sustainability, and whether or not anyone shared something that made them think differently or surprised them. And we really wanted to highlight in doing that people have different starting points, and wherever you're starting from is absolutely fine. So yeah, that was quite fun. I think people quite enjoyed the opportunity to build stuff. Sometimes people are a bit nervous about kind of some of those more creative activities, but we will do those types of things very intentionally in this process, because we know that people like to communicate in different ways, they will learn in different ways, and just talking all the time isn't something that just works for everyone. So finding as many opportunities for people to share what they think and what they feel along the way feels quite important to us. So we'll keep on doing that. Sorry, my slides have just temporarily broken, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and re-share them if you give me one moment. Sorry about that. And there we go. Okay, so they had a break after doing all of that, and we were really using whatever their starting point was as the kickoff point. But after the break, we came back, and this was the point at which some other contributors came into the space and started to share a bit more information, which was the beginning of their learning journey about the subject matter. So the first contributor we had was Marlene Mira, who's the Chief Executive of Globe International. And what that presentation did was it introduced some of the global, the national, and also the London, the citywide context to start people thinking about basically, why are we talking about climate change and sustainability? Why is it important? Why does it matter? So that was a just over 10-minute introduction to that. And just to say again, we will be sharing slides from these presentations on the Assembly website if you're interested in looking in more detail about what happened there. We then had a second contributor. This was Adam Driscoll, who is the resident and co-chair of the Council's Staff Sustainability Network. And what Adam did was give a quite brief snapshot of climate challenges in Barnet. So he touched on the history and the current context for these discussions, and touched on themes including transport, green spaces, housing, skills, communities, and adaptation. So quite a few interesting, I think, nuggets and insights into what things are like in Barnet at the moment. And then we had a third and final contributor. So this was Yogita Popat, who is the Assistant Director for Sustainability at Barnet Council. And what Yogita did was introduce the council's existing sustainability action plan, where that came from, a bit of the context, and some details on emissions across the borough, just again highlighting some interesting things that she felt it was relevant for people to know as we kicked off this process. And really importantly, this presentation introduced the key themes that we're going to be touching on and discussing throughout the Assembly. And those themes are areas that the Council has identified as some of the kind of primary sources for emissions across the borough, so areas where we really need to take some action. And they include housing and buildings, transport, renewable energy, waste, business and skills, and the natural environment, and of course biodiversity linked to that too. There's also a couple of other things that are very internal to the council that this process will focus less on, but they include the council's staff policy and supply chains, and the council's investments. And following that, of course, as you can imagine, we were very close to the end of the session. That's quite a lot for a first one. The prompts were just really to think about what people found interesting in those presentations, if anything surprised them, and any questions they had. And they could share them with each other after just kind of pausing for personal reflection for a minute or two. But we've also captured up lots of those questions, and we're planning to respond to them in between sessions, particularly where there are kind of technical questions around climate change and sustainability. And that was it. That was our 2.5 hours together. So what happens now? Well, we've got plenty more sessions to go. Everyone involved in this process is going to be engaged in these discussions for at least 30 hours. So the next session we've actually got scheduled for next week on Sunday, the 5th of March, a bit of a longer session that day. And there we're planning to build on that introduction that people have had to climate change and sustainability in a few ways. We'll be doing in the morning an immersive activity for participants to explore what they think about climate change in a session that we're delivering in partnership with the University College London. So essentially they're actually going to bring into the space some technology and some iPads and use kind of storytelling narratives around different routes to action you can take on climate change for people to explore the issue in a different way. So I think, again, just just touching on that point that we're trying to introduce ways to learn about the topic and prompt discussion in different ways. That's part of that. We'll also be doing conversations around making change, a bit of futures thinking and imagination. So supporting people to start thinking about how do you make change? How can we imagine alternative futures? Because a big part of this, and again, connected to the main question, is the changes that we need to make now and in the future. And to understand that part of the question, we need to think about what we mean by now and the future. So in that session, we'll be digging into that. And another thing that we'll be digging into is what we framed as equity, fairness, and principles for decision making, because there is an opportunity through this process to look at principles for how you make decisions when you're talking about climate change, both within this process, but actually more broadly across Barnet as well. So that'll be the first start of that. But the fairness and equity part really touches on the fact that we know that climate change, sustainability, all those issues impact people and touch people in different ways across our communities. So we want to start thinking about what that means. And of course, having such a diverse group of participants, they are very, very well placed to start talking about that from the perspectives of their own lives, their families, their communities. We'll then be after lunch doing an interactive activity where we're imagining the day in the life of a Barnet resident. And through doing that, we'll be exploring some of the key themes of the Assembly, including around housing and buildings, transport, sustainable consumption, and natural environment and biodiversity. So as someone that lives in Barnet, what are my touch points for all of these things throughout my usual day? How do I travel across the borough? What is it like in my home? And how can we start thinking about ways to live more sustainably? And there'll be some invited contributors connected to each of those areas to support interactive activities at stations that we'll be working around. So that's it, really. I know it's quite short for the first one. It was quite a short session, though, 2.5 hours. But I'm just going to say a little bit about keeping in touch, and then I'll stop sharing my screen and, yeah, have a look at the questions and see what else we can do for the next wee while we have together. But keeping in touch. So first thing to say is we have the website that is up now. There is a link there and I'll post it in the chat too. But this is a good resource. This is the resource that is external facing for you to have a look at to find out what's going on in the sessions and find out how you can keep engaged in the things that I'm going to tell you about next. We also are going to continue doing these types of sessions. And I said any feedback or things you'd like to see in them would be really great to hear if you wouldn't mind posting in the chat. But you can sign up to these show and share sessions via the Eventbrite page, which I'm sure you found when you signed up to this one. We don't have a cap on numbers, so whoever wants to come is very, very welcome to. We are also running the Observer programme that I mentioned. Unfortunately, spaces for this are limited. They have to be limited, otherwise we'll crowd the space too much and it'd be quite difficult to run the process of the Assembly. So what we're asking people to do is express an interest in 3 sessions, and we will try our best to get you to at least one of those sessions. But you would physically be in the room where the space where the Assembly is happening. There are some guidelines just to ensure we can ensure the smooth running of the Assembly process and that people aren't being influenced by observers. But yeah, if that's interesting to you, I'll again post a link in the chat, and please do sign up if you'd like to come along and see what's going on. So future Assembly sessions, again, we've got quite a few. So the next one is on Sunday, the 5th of March. That's next Sunday from 9:30 to 3:30. And then we'll do a show and share after that. We've then got sessions planned for the 20th of March, the 29th of March, and then weekend sessions on the 22nd and 23rd of April, and the 20th of May and the 21st of May. And it's that session in the 20th and 21st of May where we'll be having and coming out with the final recommendations from this process. Thank you. Okay. That's it. That's it from me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm also going to stop the recording. Fab. Okay, great. Thank you.